So let me begin by providing some context. I've been teaching a module on introductory linguistics for some time now. Enrollment can range from 250 to 350 students, and the module is conducted in a lecture tutorial format, where most of the tutorials are run by graduate student TAs. Before COVID, tutorials were conducted in person, once a week, and involved tutor-led discussions of problem sets that students were expected to attempt prior to the tutorial. During the tutorial, students were graded for class participation. So why change something that isn't broken? Well, we consistently face issues regarding the assessment of class participation, as some students would dominate the discussions, while others felt left out. Tutors were also unable to provide detailed feedback on students' individual problems. With the shift to online learning, I felt that the problem with managing class participation would probably be worse in a synchronous online setting. Moreover, I wanted to avoid a situation where students, especially the freshmen who make up the bulk of the enrollment, are disengaged from the learning environment. So I asked myself, what if tutorials were asynchronous instead? This would avoid the problem of having to manage synchronous online discussions. But how do I create a learning community, which studies have shown to be important for remote learning? I decided to have students work in groups to submit written solutions to the problem sets, with the idea that group work and peer learning would provide a community that might otherwise be lost in an online setting. We would also be able to provide better feedback to the students based on their written solutions. This was implemented using Microsoft Teams. As you can see on the left, I created a separate team for each tutorial group. And on the right is an example of a team created for a tutorial group where we can have video calls and leave messages for one another within the general channel. Within each team, I then created private channels for each group, which I called gangs. Only students within the gang and the tutors had access to their private channel, so it was a dedicated space for them to work in. Every week, students would meet in their private channels to discuss the problem sets and create a new document to work on their written solutions. Since this was asynchronous, they had the added flexibility of whether to use the scheduled tutorial time. After the deadline, the tutors would go in and provide feedback on the written solutions using track changes or comments, as you can see here. Our feedback would be tailored to every group's solution, and the medium allowed for our feedback to be as detailed as necessary. Because every tutorial group was organized as a team, we were also able to address mistakes that were common across the gangs. So these posts that you see here are in the general channel, which everybody in the tutorial group has access to. So how has this helped to create a community of learning? Well, we know that students met weekly in their private channels to work on the problem sets. They also left offline messages for one another and even described their collective struggle with the problem sets to the tutors. What really impressed me was that the learning community was not limited to the problem sets. So for instance, some students met in their private channels to revise for the midterms and to review their answers with one another. The tutors also interacted closely as parts of these learning communities. For example, students engaged the tutors with their questions about the problem sets in the various ways allowed by the medium, including requesting for video calls. Students also felt comfortable enough to ask questions about their individual essays within their gang's private channel. I think this really goes to show that students treated their gang as an in-group and didn't mind discussing aspects of their individual essays in their presence. So quite unexpectedly, we saw closer interactions between the tutors and the students in spite of remote learning and the lack of synchronous online meetings, as you can see here from the messages that students left for the tutors in their final solutions. So reflecting on the entire experience, I really liked doing asynchronous tutorials. We were able to provide tailored feedback that addresses the weaknesses of each group, foster online learning communities, and promote quality interactions between tutors and students. Of course, there are drawbacks. First of all, nobody likes marking, much less on a weekly basis. But I think this is a small sacrifice to make. Second, and more importantly, tutors don't get to gain experience with actual classroom management, which I think is an important part of the tutoring experience. So one thing I might do in the future is to develop a hybrid model where tutorials are mostly asynchronous as described, while incorporating occasional face-to-face sessions, perhaps for review or revision, so that tutors can gain classroom experience. One remaining issue, however, has to do with sleeping teammates. This is, of course, part and parcel of assigning group work, but because the group work here extends throughout the entire semester, its effect on the other teammates is more long-lasting. So I would be very grateful if anyone has any suggestions on how to deal with this. Thank you.